I'd like to thank the organizers of this event for giving us non-politicians the opportunity to lie in public. And for the record, I adapted my story from a Kentucky tale recorded by Richard Tjhe. Well, I thought I knew a thing or two about cold and snow, but nothing prepared me for the northeaster of 1969 that paralyzed the entire city of Boston, leaving thousands of cars stranded around Route 128. And that winter, as I shoveled yet again snow off the roof of my house, I promised myself that I would move south at the first opportunity and leave this miserably cold snow belt. Well, that opportunity finally came in the spring of 1999 when blooming dogwood trees and redwood pear trees welcomed me to North Carolina. I bought me a tight little house on the south side of Piney Mountain off Cornwallis Road, just outside of Durham. And I gladly traded my business suit for coveralls. And that first January, when the weathermen predicted snow, I wasn't worried. I went to bed that night, slept soundly. But the next morning, when I woke up, I knew something was different. I could feel it. The house was dark and cold. There's no power. And when I looked out the windows, I saw nothing but darkness. And when I tried opening the front door, it wouldn't budge. I was snowbound. There was no doubt about it. Hey, but I wasn't worried. I had food in the pantry, firewood, and my trusty wood-fired stove. I could easily last a couple of days. Well, 3 days later, I had no food, no firewood, and I had even burned a couple of wooden shelves just to keep warm. So I decided I'd better venture outside, look for food and fuel if I was going to survive my very first North Carolina winter. So I picked up my axe and carefully removed the stovepipe, chopped my way through the roof, removed the upper part of the stovepipe. And when I did that, I noticed that the warm stovepipe had melted a hole in the snow. And that hole must have been a good 30 feet high. But at the very top of that hole, at the very top, I could see a patch of blue. So I used my axe to chop footholds in the snow and wiggled my way up to the top. And when I stepped on that hard, crusty snow, there was a sight to behold. It's not a tree, not a house to be seen, all buried. And the only tall building visible in Durham was the one people affectionately called the Green Rocket. Actually, they called it something else, but it's an ambush. I looked all around and found only one tree, and that tree was on the very top of Piney Mountain, so I headed for it. And as I reached the top, I just warmed up all over with the glow of happiness. Why, that old hickory tree must have been a good 30 feet above the surface of the snow. And swinging in the breeze on its branches, like beautiful decorations, were raccoons, frozen. Well, I shook that tree as hard as I could, and all those spoons came falling down into the snow. I gathered them all together and tied them up to their tail, and then proceeded to chop down the top of that tree, and it fell down into the snow. Well, then I carefully started removing all its tree limbs and branches, and when I got to the very last branch, wouldn't you know, that log started slipping down Piney Mountain. It started sliding faster and faster. It was burning. It was going so fast it hit the bottom of the valley with a loud thud and then started shooting up Couch Mountain. It was going so fast. I thought for sure it would just fly straight into the sky. But it didn't. It reached the top, heated a time or two, and that's when I decided to climb up Couch Mountain to finish my job. But wouldn't you know it, just then, that log started coming back just as fast. And it was coming back so fast, I thought it would spear me right through my rear end. And I ran as fast as I could back up to the top of Piney Mountain and dug a couple of footholds. prepared myself to grab a hold of that log. But wouldn't you know it, that log was just a wee bit too short. Couldn't quite reach it. It hesitated a moment or two, and then started sliding right back. Going faster and faster, hit the bottom of the valley, instead of going up Couch Mountain where it reached the top, teetered a time or two, and it started coming right back. Well, I watched that log go back and forth a couple of times, but as it was getting cold and dark, I gathered all my coons and all my firewood and walked back home. Put the stovepipe back on, fired up the stove, prepared coon stew. Well, 5 days later, I was out of food, out of firewood. I had burned all my chairs, all my tables, just to keep warm. And I decided I'd better venture out to look for food and fuel once again. But just then, there was a ray of light. They came through the top of one of the windows, and I heard the sound of dripping water. The snow was melting. Now I pushed my way out through the front door, and just as I started heading to Durham to buy me supplies, in the corner of my eye, I noticed this deep gully between Piney Mountain and Couch Mountain. So I decided to investigate. I went over there, and wouldn't you know it, that log was still going back and forth, just a few inches now. But all the slipping and sliding had worn that log down to the size of a toothpick. So I bent down, picked it out, put it in my pocket. Best toothpick I've ever had.